My daughter-in-law called me outdated. She didn't know my methods took down 3 domestic terror cells last fiscal year. The word hung in the air between us, thick and cloying as the scent of lilies and old polish that permeated St. Jude's. Outdated. It was a label, a dismissal, delivered with the kind of pitying smile that only the young and certain can muster. Ashley stood there, resplendent in a cream-colored dress that cost more than my first car, her phone held loosely in one hand, ready to capture a perfectly curated moment of her son's special day. My grandson. In my arms, little Daniel stirred, his small body a warm, trusting weight against my chest. "I just mean, Gloria," she continued, her voice a carefully modulated whisper that carried perfectly in the pre-service hush, that there are more modern ways to think about things, about everything, community, purpose, even fashion. She gestured vaguely at my simple navy blue dress and sensible low-heeled shoes. The shoes had seen me across tarmacs in 3 different countries this year, but to her, they were just a sign of a woman who had given up. I hummed a noncommittal note, my gaze fixed on the stained glass window depicting Michael the Archangel casting down the serpent. I had always been fond of that one. It was a clear, unambiguous depiction of duty. There was no moral gray area in that pane of colored glass. There was a threat, and there was a response. Simple. Clean. My son, Michael, shifted uncomfortably beside me. He was a good man, my son, caught between the woman who raised him and the woman he loved, a diplomatic post for which he had no training. He shot me a helpless look, a silent plea for me to just let it go, to not engage. He didn't understand. Engagement was never my strategy in these theaters of operation. My strategy was silence. My strategy was observation. Let the opposition reveal their tactics, their assumptions, their weaknesses. Ashley's weakness was her desperate need for her own voice to be the loudest in the room. This wasn't the first time. The dismissal had become a quiet theme in our family gatherings, a background radiation of condescension. I remembered the first Thanksgiving after she and Michael were married. I had been back on domestic soil for less than 72 hours, my bones still aching with the memory of a C-130's rattling fuselage and the lingering metallic taste of fear in the back of my throat. We had been running a high-threat extraction in a place that did not officially exist, and the dust of that place still felt ground into my skin. I had made the mistake of mentioning a geopolitical event I'd seen unfolding on the news. Ashley had patted my hand, her bracelets jangling. "Oh, Gloria, the 24-hour news cycle is so toxic. It's designed to create anxiety. I follow a few thought leaders on Instagram who really help deconstruct the mainstream narrative. It's all about an energy of fear, you see." She had then spent 10 minutes explaining global politics to me as if I were a child who had been frightened by a monster under the bed. She spoke of vibes and collective consciousness and the problematic nature of borders. All while I sat there, the phantom weight of my body armor a ghost on my shoulders, the faces of the men I'd lost on my last rotation flickering behind my eyes. I had a top-secret clearance that gave me access to intelligence that could topple governments. But in my son's dining room, I was an uninformed old woman being schooled on deconstructing narratives by a 20-something who believed a hashtag was a form of activism. Michael had tried to intervene gently. "Ash, Mom used to work for the government. I'm sure she has some perspective." "Oh, of course," she'd chirped, her smile never faltering. "But that was then. The world is changing so fast. It's a completely different paradigm now." A different paradigm. I had almost laughed. The paradigm was the same as it had always been. There were wolves and there were sheep, and there were sheep herders. The technology changed, the ideology shifted, but the fundamental structure of conflict was as old as Cain and Abel. She saw the world as a networking event, a place to be curated and branded. I saw it as a series of interlocking threats to be managed, mitigated, or neutralized. Her world was built on the foundation of safety that my world provided, and she was utterly, blissfully unaware of it. So I fell silent. It was a lesson I had learned early in my real career. Silence is a shield. It is a weapon. When you are silent, people fill that silence with their own assumptions, their own narratives. They project their own inadequacies onto you. They will tell you everything you need to know without you ever having to ask a single question. Over the years, Ashley had filled my silence with a detailed portrait of a woman I did not recognize. Lonely, disconnected, slightly sad, and utterly, completely outdated. I embraced the role. It was the deepest cover I had ever held. I bought the sensible cardigans, I learned to garden, I brought Tupperware containers of potato salad to family barbecues. I became Gloria, the quiet retiree, a harmless relic from a simpler time. It was a necessary camouflage. The truth of my life was not something that could be shared over Sunday dinner. The truth was written in classified after-action reports, stored in secure servers deep beneath the Virginia countryside. The truth was in the fine white scars on my forearms and the permanent ache in a shoulder that had been dislocated one too many times. The oath I took wasn't just a promise to defend the country. It was a vow of silence, a promise to carry the burden of what I knew and what I had done so that people like Ashley and Michael and little Daniel could live in a world where their biggest problem was a gluten intolerance or a bad Wi-Fi signal. Their peace was my life's work. My silence was the price of that peace. And so I let them believe. I let Ashley think I was a woman whose world was small and shrinking. It was easier, it was safer for them. The dissonance was a strange, hollow ache in my chest. Some days I would be sitting in my quiet suburban home, the scent of lemon polish in the air, listening to Ashley on the phone describe her latest wellness retreat, while in my head, I was running tactical scenarios, replaying the hiss of a radio transmission, the cold, hard geometry of a kill zone, two different worlds coexisting in the same mind. Sometimes I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. The priest began the service. His voice, deep and resonant, filled the nave. He spoke of faith, of dedication, of a promise to protect and to nurture. I held my grandson closer, his small fingers wrapped around one of mine, his grip surprisingly strong. This was why. All the noise, all the sacrifice, all the silent years, it all distilled down to this single perfect point, the weight of this child in my arms, the future, a future free from the things I saw in the dark. Ashley, in the pew beside me, was already discreetly angling her phone to get a picture of the altar, documenting the moment, not living in it. She nudged her friend beside her and whispered, not quietly enough, "Look at her. She probably thinks this is all so literal." Another pitying glance my way. I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten, a familiar, controlled response. I cataloged the insult, filed it away, and let it go. Emotional debris, irrelevant to the mission. The mission right now was to be a grandmother at her grandson's baptism. The service proceeded. The water was blessed. We stood, and Michael took Daniel from me to carry him to the font. As they walked up the aisle, Ashley leaned over to me again, her breath smelling of mint and something vaguely herbal. "You know, Gloria, after this, I wanted to talk to you," she said, her tone dripping with manufactured concern. "I found this wonderful community group for seniors. They do pottery, book clubs. It would be a great way for you to get out, meet people your own age, to, you know, connect." There it was, the final perfect condescension, not an insult, but an act of pity. She was trying to solve the problem of me, the quiet, lonely old woman who didn't fit into her vibrant, modern world. She was offering me a hobby, a distraction, a place to quietly fade away, while the real world, her world, moved on. The sheer, staggering ignorance of it was almost breathtaking. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time all day. I saw the carefully applied makeup, the flicker of insecurity in her eyes behind the confident smile. She wasn't being malicious. In her own way, she thought she was being kind. That was the most insulting part of all. She was a child offering a toy to a soldier who had just returned from war. A cold, profound calm settled over me. It was the same stillness that always came in the moments before everything went wrong. Or right. The world seemed to slow, the priest's voice fading into a low hum. I observed Ashley as I would a target of interest. Her breathing was shallow, her posture was performative. She was seeking validation from her friends who were watching our interaction. Her strategy was social pressure. Her objective was to reinforce her own status as the compassionate, enlightened caregiver to her poor, outdated mother-in-law. I didn't answer. I simply held her gaze. I let the silence stretch, becoming a chasm between us. I saw her confidence begin to waver. My lack of response was not in her script. She expected me to be grateful or perhaps mildly offended, but she did not expect this absolute stillness, this utter lack of reaction. It unnerved her. It was in that stretched, silent moment that the world changed. The heavy oak doors at the back of the church burst open. They didn't swing, they slammed against the stone walls, the sound a crack of thunder that ripped through the holy quiet. Every head in the church snapped around. The priest stopped mid-sentence, his hand frozen over the baptismal font. Two men stood silhouetted in the doorway, sharp suits against the bright morning light. But it was the man who strode between them who commanded the room. He was tall, with iron-gray hair cut severe and short. He wore a dark, perfectly tailored suit that couldn't quite conceal the rigid set of his shoulders or the unmistakable economy of movement that spoke of years of discipline. He moved with a purpose that made everyone else in the room look like they were standing still. His eyes, the color of ice, swept the nave once, dismissing every face until they found mine. Assistant Director Richard Paulson, head of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division. My boss. The polite chatter of the small gathering after the ceremony died instantly. The air crackled with a new, sharp energy. People weren't just surprised, they were afraid. Paulson's presence was a violation of their soft, safe world. He was the world outside, kicking the door in. He walked down the center aisle, his hard-soled shoes echoing on the stone floor. He ignored the priest's shocked expression. He ignored Michael, who stood frozen with my grandson in his arms. He ignored Ashley, whose mouth was hanging slightly open, her curated world shattered by this intrusion of raw, unapologetic authority. He strode directly to me. He did not slow down. He did not hesitate. He stopped 2 feet in front of my pew, his posture as rigid as the stone pillars around us. "Agent Crawford," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a razor. It was a voice accustomed to giving orders that could not be disobeyed. "The cell we've tracked for 18 months activated in Newark. Your asset made contact." The words were code, but they were also a detonation. Cell, asset, activated. The world of pottery classes and book clubs evaporated. The grandmother persona fell away like a discarded coat. In its place stood the woman I had been for 40 years. My mind was already moving, processing the information. 18 months of patient, painstaking work. An asset I had personally cultivated, a dangerous and unstable man deep inside a domestic terror group. If he had made contact on the emergency channel, it meant only one thing. They were moving. Now. My movements were smooth, economical, born of 1,000 drills. I turned to Michael. He was staring. his face a mask of utter confusion. I held out my hands for the baby. He passed Daniel to me without a word. I kissed my grandson's forehead, inhaling the sweet, clean scent of him one last time. This is what I protect. Then I handed him back to his father, my touch firm, grounding. "Michael," I said, my voice low and calm, "I have to go." From my simple, sensible purse, I withdrew my credentials. The worn leather wallet fell open. The gold FBI badge gleamed in the dim light of the church. The laminated ID, with a picture of a much younger woman with harder eyes, sat beside it. I didn't flash it, I simply held it. I looked at Ashley. The color had drained from her face. Her eyes, wide with shock, darted from the badge to Paulson to me. The pity was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. The carefully constructed reality she had built around me, the narrative of the outdated old woman, was crumbling into dust at her feet. She looked at me as if she had never seen me before. And of course, she hadn't. Paulson had not taken his eyes off me. He was waiting for my acknowledgement. I gave him a short, sharp nod, the briefest inclination of my head. It was all he needed. And then, the moment that broke the world. Richard Paulson, the man who briefed Senate Intelligence Committees, the man who had the president on a direct line, a man who commanded thousands of agents across the globe, stood a little straighter. He looked at me, Gloria Crawford, the quiet grandmother in the navy blue dress, and he said, with the full weight of his authority and a deep, unmistakable deference, "Ma'am, your country needs you now." The word "ma'am" echoed in the silent church. It was not the polite term for an older woman. It was the term of respect for a superior officer. It was the acknowledgement of a legend in the field. In that single word, the entire hierarchy of Ashley's world, of my family's world, was not just inverted, it was annihilated. In that room, at that moment, there was no higher authority than the quiet woman in the sensible shoes. I turned and walked away from the pew. I did not look back at my son's stunned face or Ashley's gaping mouth. They were part of the world I had just left behind. Paulson fell into step beside me, his two agents trailing behind us like grim shadows. As we walked down the aisle, he began the brief. His voice, a low murmur, meant only for me. "The target is a chemical plant adjacent to the port. The asset confirms they have a device on site. He says the timer is active, but he doesn't know the window. He's gone dark since the transmission." My mind was already a flurry of calculations. Newark, chemical plant port, a multifaceted threat, maximum casualties, economic disruption, my asset, unstable but reliable. If he was dark, he was either compromised or dead. I had to assume he was compromised. His knowledge was now their weapon. We reached the open doors and stepped out into the blindingly bright day. A black Chevrolet Tahoe was idling at the curb, its engine a low thrum. One of the agents opened the rear door for me. The interior was cool and dark, smelling of leather and electronics. It was a scent I knew better than the lemon polish in my own home. Before I got in, I paused and looked back at my son, who had followed us to the doorway, still holding his child. He looked lost. I gave him one last look, trying to convey everything I couldn't say. "I love you. I'm sorry. Keep him safe." He just nodded, his eyes filled with a million questions I could never answer. I slid into the Tahoe. Paulson got in the other side. The door closed with a solid, final thud, sealing us off from that other world. The vehicle pulled away from the curb smoothly, accelerating with purpose. The church and my family shrank in the rearview mirror until they were gone. "What's my timeline?" I asked, my voice already different, harder. The grandmother was gone. Agent Crawford was on duty. "Wheels up at McGuire in 40 minutes, Paulson replied, handing me a secure tablet. The screen glowed to life, displaying satellite imagery and schematics. "The tactical team is already en route, but they won't move without your authorization. You built the asset. You know the players. This is your call, Gloria. He called me Gloria now. In the field, we were colleagues. The ma'am was for the benefit of the civilians, a tool to establish authority and expedite my exit, a calculated move. Paulson was nothing if not calculating. I studied the screen, my mind absorbing the data, cross-referencing it with the profiles I had memorized years ago, the faces of the men in the cell, their habits, their training, their psychological triggers, the architecture of the building, the prevailing wind direction from the port. 1,000 data points coalesced into a single ugly picture. A strategy began to form, cold and sharp, in my mind. I thought of Ashley's face in that last moment, the shock, the utter demolition of her certainty. She would never look at me the same way again. The camouflage was blown. The quiet, outdated grandmother was gone forever. I felt a pang, not of regret, but of something akin to loss. The loss of a simple, quiet life I never really had, but had pretended to for so long. But that feeling was fleeting, replaced by the cold, familiar focus of the mission. The call had come. The duty was clear. Ashley and her friends talked about living an authentic life. They had no idea what authenticity was. This was it. The weight of the world settling on your shoulders, the knowledge that your choices in the next few hours would determine who lived and who died, the quiet acceptance of that terrible, sacred responsibility. She had called me outdated. She was wrong. Trends are outdated, fashions are outdated, the need for followers and likes is outdated, but duty, sacrifice, the willingness to stand in the dark so that others can live in the light, those things are timeless. My methods weren't old-fashioned. They were eternal. They were the bedrock on which her fragile, curated world was built. And they were about to save thousands of lives. The Tahoe merged onto the highway, picking up speed. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me but a life that was no longer mine. Ahead of me, there was only the mission. I was not outdated. I was operational.